Welcome to Cause Before Symptom, uncovering the real cabal and spiritual forces that are controlling the world. And now, here is your host, James Carner.
Welcome to Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. Today is February 6th, 2026, and tonight's episode is all about Part 19, the examination of Ecclesiastes, between the Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox and King James Bible. So tonight we're going to be talking about the Ecclesiastes, which stands in a different registrar than the books that precede it. Now, it does not narrate covenant history, and it does not proclaim prophetic warning. It observes life as it is experienced within its boundaries. Labor, wisdom, pleasure, injustice, time, aging, and death are examined without ornament. And the voice speaks from within human limitation and not above it. The book opens with the phrase that has shaped centuries of theology, vanity of vanities. Yet this phrase hinges on translation. The Hebrew term, often rendered vanity, can also carry the sense of breath vapor, mist, and something fleeting rather than morally corrupt. The tonal difference is decisive, as vanity can sound accusatory, as though existence itself is rebuked, and vapor sounds observational, as though transience is being measured rather than condemned. Well, the opening word determines whether the book is heard as despair or sobriety, as Ecclesiastes repeatedly frames its reflections with the boundary phrase under the sun. And this language narrows scope. It does not claim that nothing has meaning. It examines what meaning can be secured within early cycles alone. And generations rise and pass away. The wind circles. Rivers run, human striving repeats. So the question is not whether God exists, but whether permanence can be found in what is temporary. Now, wisdom is pursued and found limited. Pleasure is embraced and found insufficient. And work is examined and found unable to prevent mortality. Yet the book does not rush into rebellion. It names limits very carefully. Divine presence is not denied, it is assumed. And God appears not through dramatic intervention, but through the structure of time, the giving of seasons, and the certainty of final reckoning. Silence and delay are not absence, they are boundary. And the Ethiopian Tewahedo witness and the King James rendering will stand side by side in this examination, because Ecclesiastes is built on rhythm and repetition. Small lexical shifts can reshape tone dramatically. Does the translation lean towards cynicism or simple restraint? Toward moral condemnation or existential humility? Does it preserve the sobriety of observation or intensify the language into futility? Well, the concluding call to fear God and keep his commandments anchors the book in accountability. The question is whether that conclusion feels like restoration after despair or clarification after sober measurement. Tone determines theology, and if the book has been heard as nihilistic, well, the ending sounds abrupt. So if it has been heard as measured realism, the ending sounds consistent. So this examination tonight will follow the established anchor. Scripture will be quoted directly and audibly in both witnesses. Commentary will then follow, but not precede. The aim is not to argue corruption or motive, but to listen for cadence. In a book concerned with breath, vapor, and mortality, the weight of a single word shapes the entire architecture. So Ecclesiastes does not destroy meaning, but it removes illusions. The investigation now turns to whether both traditions preserve that restraint equally, or whether translation choices subtly tilt the listener's perception of God time, and human striving. Shout out to everybody on the live chat Rumble. #1 Warriors, Robert Gerdison saying here, bright and early. Hi, everyone. Yes, you are, Robert. Thank you for being here, my friend. And #2 Warrior is Scorpion saying, hey, Pastor. Hey, Warrior family. Glad to see it all. Awesome. Thanks for being here, Scorpion. #3 Warriors, the Boots Hafter, the Spleef Sparker, stating, hello, Pastor James Carner, voice of the Rebel Airwaves and creator of ElitePotion.com. Hello, Warrior family. Nice to see you all. Just hit that X button and thumbs up and the live chat then. Thank you very much. Yes, if you could all do that with me right now, take your thumb, hit the X on the top right corner, and then hit the thumbs up so there's not any 0 likes. And then hit live chat and you won't lose your spot, I promise. That will help me with the algorithm that Rumble only judges us based on. Thank you, Boots. Appreciate it. And thank you for being here. And #4 Warrior is Ayota Bra. What's going on, Ayota Bra? And he says, hey, everyone. Thank you for being here as well. Glad to have you guys here. Let's get straight into breaking news.
Welcome to Shitty Breaking News with your host, James Carner, offering his shitty opinion.
Well, authorities are still investigating a new message in Nancy Guthrie's kidnapping case. That's Susanna Guthrie, who was a newswoman turned something else, and apparently her mother got abducted, and the abductors want money, and they gave them by 5 p.m. yesterday, and well, FBI's on it. Yay. You know, what's really interesting to me is we have how many centers? I think over 68 centers after 9/11. These are data centers collecting information on Americans. You know, this is for the Freedom of Information. This is for the Patriot Act. Okay. This is to protect us from terrorism. So the NSA, and along with these companies that work for the NSA that spy on Americans, and there's 68 of them, meaning there's only 50 states. There's a couple in bigger states. But regardless, there's one in every state, and they listen in on every call, every text, and read every email. And it's funny, we've got all this technology, you know, through even Plantier, and we can't dig up anything on these abductors in the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping case. That's pretty sad. That means our own Secret Service can't find dick with the equipment that they have, even when they spy on us illegally, in my opinion. Trump removes video with racist clip depicting Obamas as apes. Oh my God. Oh my God. I didn't even rehearse any of this stuff. I had no idea. This is national news, man. This was from the BBC. I had no idea there was a video that Trump depicted the Obamas as apes. If it is out there, that's really mean, dude. Just mean. I don't care who you are, what you've done. You know, God. Racism is not cool. Neither is, you know, making fun of people. And Trump, that's just what he does. But dude, this is awful, you know. But hey, that had to make the top 10 news here. I feel bad for the Obamas. Look, I don't like the Obamas. I don't like the Bushes. I don't like the Clintons. I don't like the Bidens. I don't like Trump. I don't like any of them because presidents are selected, not elected. So I don't like them because, well, they serve corporate interests and not the American people. And when the BBC releases this, it's just like, this is how they divide and conquer us. They get us all mad. So now the left are going to be like, racist. And they're not going to look at the truth. And the truth is, these kinds of articles are designed to divide and conquer, keep us angry at each other because, oh, well, MAGA voted for Trump. Let's hate MAGA. Well, unless you grow up, pull the thumb out of your mouth, and actually start to understand politics, which the word itself means to control a group of people, and start to really see what's going on, is that, they give you crumbs from the billions that they steal from you. Unless you guys can stop with this racist bullshit and just come together and work with each other. I'm talking about the left and the right. And I'm not talking about the politicians. I'm talking about just the people themselves, the good people of America, the Americans, including even the immigrants, coming together and fighting against these evil cabal. And, stop, find out what companies that they're, investing in, and stop giving them money. That's it. That's what we have to do. Are we going to do it? I don't know. We're so bombarded with electromagnetic frequencies, we can't keep ourselves awake. But regardless, that title hit me by surprise. Members of Congress will have access to unredacted Epstein files. All of it is just damning. Is anybody going to do anything about it? How long have the Epstein files been going on? How long ago has it been since he was supposedly suicided? Oh, I'm sorry, when he killed himself. How long has it been? It's been what, 6, 7 years now? 8? I mean, when is it going to be released? It won't. But the good news is that God's not letting this one go. They keep trying to push this one under the rug, and it just keeps coming out. It's crazy. Iran and U.S. to reopen nuclear talks in Oman after weeks of tension. Ooh, tension. Ooh, like Iran can make big damage in America. I highly doubt that they can get an intercontinental ballistic missile into our country. I just think that we've got enough technology to shut that down before it happens. But, I just don't see it happening. So this Iran and U.S. reopening nuclear talks right now, is this the big thing? Who cares? Give them nukes. Let them defend themselves. That's my opinion. It's pissing people off, unquote. Centrist Democrats are livid with AIPAC after the primary fiasco. Apparently, AIPAC spent $2 million attacking moderate-leaning Tom Malinowski in a House special election and may have handed the race to progressive and the Lilia Mhaya. Okay, so what? It's pissing people off, though. Well, pull the thumb out of your mouth and grow up. Who gives a shit? How Trump RX drug prices compare to generic alternatives. Well, let's take a look here. I don't know. I don't care. And they won't let me read it because they want me to pay for it. So screw you. So there you have it, guys. That is all of the shitty, crappy, breaking news. All right, we're going to go to a quick commercial. 2 of them. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Part 19, the examination of Ecclesiastes, between the Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox canon and the King James Bible.
Why do 75% of people feel exhausted all the time? The answer might surprise you. In the 1920s, Standard Oil decided to dive into medicine. They pushed synthetic petroleum into our drugs. Sure, it masked symptoms, but it wrecked our guts. Our good bacteria, which fight off parasites and heavy metals, got wiped out by crude oil. But here's the good news. We can fix this by going back to nature. Introducing Elite Potion, the world's top detox program. It restores your good bacteria by removing toxic threats like aluminum, strontium, barium, and parasites. Imagine feeling energized and alive again. They said there couldn't be a pill that did it all. We invented it. Visit elitepotion.com and reclaim your health from synthetic pharmaceuticals. Your body will thank you.
I'll give you $10,000 if you can find just one person who's never filed a tax return.
I'll give you $10,000 if you can find just one person who's never filed a tax return.
Have you ever filed a tax return? Yes.
Nobody. Not one. It starts at 16. That first job, that first form. The moment they became a taxpayer. Every April 15th, millions keep signing the same contract, thinking it's the law. But it isn't the law that binds them. It's the signature. 98% of Americans never owed it. Learn more at unincorporatedassociations.com.
All right, we're back to the show. You know, thinking of that whole Obama thing, you know, let's just get to the truth here. White people, you're the real minority in this world. Did you know that? And you're declining. Your birth rate, white people, is going down. In fact, you are slowly being exterminated. Did you know that? There are more black, brown people in this world than there are white people. We, white people, are the true minority. And for there to be racist rants against black people, from white people, especially from Trump, too, about the Obamas, it's absolutely absurd if you're an intelligent person. Let's get over the bullshit and realize that those kinds of headlines are designed to stir up your emotions and make you angry. So don't go there. We need to use discernment and love our neighbor. Now, I was laughing because I was just like, whoa, that was like a huge, heavy topic just right out there in the open, you know, and it's just, it's stupid. So let's not buy into the divide and conquer bullshit through racism. Racism wouldn't exist if we kept bringing it up, folks. Racism wouldn't exist if we didn't talk about it. That was from Morgan Freeman, quite a wise man. So tonight we're talking about Ecclesiastes and the difference between the Tewahedo Orthodox canon and the King James Bible. And Ecclesiastes, as we've learned so far through the beginning, does not shout. It actually settles things. And after covenant victories, prophetic thunder, and the sharp introduction of Proverbs, the voice then changes. The preacher, we're talking about Solomon, who's writing these, the preacher does not confront rebellion here. He confronts repetition. And he looks at the ground beneath human striving and asks, what remains when ambition is exhausted? So the tone, it's not frantic, it's deliberate. Vanity of vanities. The phrase has echoed for centuries, but it must actually be heard correctly. If it's heard as accusation, then the book feels like rebuke, which when I read it first, that's what I felt like it. I felt like I'm just a bad person who has vanity. But that's not what it really means. And if it is heard as vapor or breath that appears and disappears, then the book feels like exposure. So the difference is not cosmetic. It shapes whether existence is condemned or simply revealed as temporary. Now the preacher, King Solomon, walks through achievement and finds it dissolving. He gathers wisdom and discovers its limit. That's kind of interesting. He tastes pleasure and sees it cannot prevent decay. Thermodynamics are against him. He builds, he plants, he acquires, he governs, and still death levels the field. So there is no theatrical collapse here. There is no prophetic fury. There's just a simple observation by King Solomon. Now, under the sun, that phrase, cycles and repeats in Ecclesiastes, and generations come and go. The wind circles back to where it began. Rivers run without filling the sea. And the eye is not satisfied with seeing. And the ear is not filled with hearing. As nothing in this cadence feels explosive. It actually, if you're reading it correctly and understand either Tewahedo language or the Old English cadence, it will actually feel explosive. And it will feel patient and almost clinical. So reality here is being measured and it's not being dramatized. But here is where translation actually matters. If the language intensifies into futility, then the book sounds despairing. And if it preserves restraint, the book sounds sober. A word like vanity can carry moral scorn. And a word like vapor carries fragility. One leans towards condemnation and the other leans towards transience. So theology turns on tone. And Ecclesiastes does not deny God. No. It simply refuses to find permanence in what God has declared temporary. Time is given in seasons. Work is given as labor. Enjoyment is given as gift. And death is given as boundary. And above it all stands judgment. Not chaotic, not impulsive, but certain judgment. Now, the preacher, Solomon, does not rebel against heaven. He strips illusions from earth. He removes the fantasy that labor can defeat mortality, that wisdom can escape limitation, that pleasure can erase consequence. Well, he does not leave the listener here without direction. He leaves you guys without pretense. And this examination will not interpret before it listens. The Ethiopian Tewahedo witness and the King James rendering will read and be read side by side, and the cadence will be allowed to speak. Breath, repetition, and time, even a single word can tip the balance between despair and discipline. So Ecclesiastes, it clears the room so that only what endures remains. And the question now is whether both traditions preserve that restraint, or whether translation has subtly shifted the sound of the preacher's voice. Let's get into it. Ecclesiastes begins without introduction to conflict or covenant breach. It opens with a declaration that frames everything that follows. The words must be heard before they are interpreted. In the Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox witness, it says, and I quote, "Vapor of vapors, says the preacher, vapor of vapors, all is vapor. What profit has a man in all his labor which he labors under the sun?" Unquote. Now here's the King James. "Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun?" The structural form is identical. The repetition is identical. The cadence is nearly identical. Yet the opening word determines tone. Vanity in English often carries moral accusation. It suggests pride, self-absorption, emptiness born of fault. It can sound like condemnation. But vapor in the Ethiopian Tewahedo canon, it does not accuse. It dissipates. It suggests something real but fleeting. Breath on a cold morning. Mist rising and disappearing. The difference is very subtle, but it shifts the emotional weight of the sentence. Now, if the book begins with moral indictment, then the preacher appears to be rebuking existence itself, which is how I read it. And I was reading it under the assumption that that's when Solomon fell, and he wrote this because, hey, he had nothing left. And he didn't even have God. He's like, all this vanity, I'm screwed, woe is me. That's not what's going on here, thanks to the Ethiopian canon. So it's not, it seems to begin with moral indictment. Then the preacher appears to be rebuking existence itself. If the book begins with observation of transience, then the preacher is measuring fragility rather than condemning it. This is absolutely important. Those two words change the entire tone and meaning behind what King Solomon is trying to say. Now, was this done on purpose? I can't prove it. I tried. But the English cadence and the way that English is completely different than, and we're talking the Old English, different than the Ge'ez to Amharic to English. They're different. We're talking about the Ethiopian canon. So if the book begins with moral indictment, then the preacher appears to be rebuking existence itself. If the book begins with observation of transience, then the preacher is measuring fragility rather than condemning it. So one tone feels like scorn, King James, and the other feels like sober realism, Ethiopian. Now, I'm not saying the King James is bad. We've been learning that both books complement each other heavily. The Hebrew term hevel, carries the sense of breath or vapor, something insubstantial, temporary, or passing. It does not inherently contain the moralized weight modern English attaches to vanity. So that distinction actually matters. Ecclesiastes may not be calling human life sinful in essence. It may be calling it fleeting, temporary. Now, the second line then sharpens the boundary. Under the sun, the inquiry is restricted. The preacher does not ask what profit exists in eternity. He asks what profit exists within the closed system of earthly striving. The scope is intentionally narrowed. And the question, what profit, does not deny value altogether. It probes surplus. Well, what remains after cycles complete? What accumulates beyond death? Labor here is not mocked. It's measured against mortality. Now, if the reader, reading both King James and Ethiopian, if they hear vanity as moral failure, then the book does sound like rebuke. But if the listener hears vapor as transience, then the book sounds like exposure. And that tonal decision governs every chapter that follows. The examination begins here because the opening word is not decorative. It establishes whether Ecclesiastes is cynical or restrained, condemning or observational. And the difference is not dramatic in wording, but it is decisive in theology. So Ecclesiastes repeats a phrase that functions like a horizontal line, under the sun. And the words appear simple, almost incidental, yet they define the scope of the entire book. They must be heard carefully before conclusions are drawn. In the Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox Witness, it says, and I quote, "What profit has a man in all his labor, which he labors under the sun?" And here's the King James rendering. "What profit hath a man of all his labor, which he taketh under the sun?" Well, the phrasing is nearly identical, yet the emphasis is not in novelty, but in repetition. The preacher, Solomon, continues to anchor his observations within this boundary. He does not claim that nothing has meaning. He examines what meaning can be secured within the visible cycle of earthly life alone. And the phrase under the sun restricts the perspective. It speaks of what is observable within time, within mortality, within the repeating pattern of generations. It does not deny heaven. It brackets heaven from the immediate inquiry. So the preacher, Solomon, is not rejecting divine oversight. He is testing human striving with an early confinement. So the Ethiopian cadence, it preserves this restraint clearly. This is a good thing. The question is framed as measurement, not accusation. And the King James phrasing, though structurally faithful, it does carry older English verbs like taketh, which can subtly intensify agency. The difference is slight, but tone accumulates across repetition. So throughout the opening chapter, Solomon observes cycles, generations passing, the sun rising and setting, the wind returning to its circuits, rivers running without filling the sea. These observations are not presented as chaos. They are presented as repetition, over and over and over. Nothing lasts. And the boundary of under the sun keeps the focus grounded in temporality. Now, if the listener, reader, forgets the boundary, then the book can sound nihilistic. If the boundary is preserved, the book sounds measured. Solomon is not declaring that existence is meaningless in totality. He is simply asking, what surplus remains within a closed system of labor and mortality? This is something that the elites of the world, the billionaires who want to live forever, are facing. Because they want to live forever. They're trying to race time to find the serum. Well, this whole distinction, it shapes theology. Without the boundary, the book leans toward despair. So if you're reading the King James, that is really shaping theology. So for a long time, we've been reading many books, and they really kind of were the same. But right when we hit Ecclesiastes, theology shifts. But both books still complement each other. Meaning you can read the King James after reading the Ethiopian, then understand exactly what he's trying to say. With the boundaries intact, the book leans towards humility. And it reminds the reader that finite labor cannot produce infinite return. So the repetition of under the sun is not poetic filler here. It is the simple architecture of life. It prevents the argument from drifting into cosmic denial. It insists that the inquiry remains earthly, temporal, and observational. And as examination continues, this boundary phrase must remain audible, as every statement about futility or transience must be heard within the scope that Solomon himself establishes. Only then can tone be judged accurately. Now, did Solomon know that the King James was going to be a different cadence and tone and change theology in the Old English cadence, and it would be different in the Ethiopian? No, he wrote it as he wrote it. But as the words get translated from language to language to language, having two to compare seems to be the most wisest choice if you're going to study and figure out God's word, and not hold on to just one, like the King James, like we felt like the Catholic Church was trying to get us to do. Now, of course, we've had new translations that took out the thes and the thys and all the Old English crap, and even the Latin kind of wording. But still, the Ethiopian rendering still complements the King James and explains what was really trying to be written. Now, the preacher moves from declaration to demonstration. And after stating that all is vapor under the sun, meaning we're just specks of dust, he points to what can be seen. So the argument is not abstract, it's simply observational. The Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox witness says, and I quote, "One generation passes away and another generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun also rises and the sun goes down and hastens to its place where it rises. The wind goes toward the south and turns about unto the north. It whirls about continually, and the wind returns again according to its circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full, unto the place from where the rivers come, where they return again." Or there they return again. Here's those same verses, but in the King James rendering. "One generation passeth away, and another generation cometh. But the earth abideth forever. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down and hasteth to his place where he arose. The wind goeth toward the south and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to its circuits. And all the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. Well, the structure is nearly identical. The cadence in both witnesses carries repetition. The difference is not doctrinal, but tonal. Again. The Ethiopian phrasing reads with slightly modern clarity. The King James carries older verb endings and pronouns, which can add weight or distance depending on the listener's ear. But the emphasis here is not on despair, but on pattern. Generations pass. The earth remains. The sun rises and returns. The wind circles. Rivers flow and return. Nothing in the passage suggests chaos. Everything suggests continuity. So the problem is not instability, it is recurrence. Let me take a step back here. I've been thinking about this, and I haven't really addressed it to you guys, the audience. But a lot of you would by now be asking the question, why are we comparing the modern English Ethiopian translation to the King James Old English? Why not compare to the new translation? Well, because the majority of Christians believe that the original King James Version is the most complete and accurate, and other translations afterward kind of take off. So we're going from a Ge'ez to Amharic to modern English. And what we're reading is from the King James, Greek, Hebrew to, I believe, Latin, and then to Old English. But there's still differences. And we can compare the others, and we could have translated it into Old English from the Ethiopian canon, but that's just not what I did. I was in a hurry, and I just wanted to compare. And I know that most Christians will stick to the King James Version. That is if you put everybody up in a voting tally, most of all Christians will say the King James original is what we need to really go from if we want the truth. So I'm just looking for the truth, and I did not translate it to Old English. So that's kind of where we have. Now, would that make a difference in the words? Maybe. Would it make a difference tonally? Maybe. But not as far of a stretch as you think. They would be still close, and we would get the same results. So this isn't a wrong thing to compare to. But it wouldn't hurt later down the road, if you guys are interested in it, to compare the one that I did to the new international version and see if there are differences. I believe there will be. And I still believe that the Ethiopian canon will still paint a merciful, loving God over the angry God that we assume in reading, even though that's not what the King James actually is saying. But tonally, you feel that way. And why that is, I don't know. So this is not a complaint against creation. We're talking about King Solomon. And it's recognition of actual rhythm. Okay, we're talking about the recurrence of instability. And the earth remains while individuals fade. Human life appears brief against a stable world. And the repetition produces weariness, not because nature is broken, but because human striving cannot interrupt its cycles. Everything we've done, we try to ruin Earth and ruin the cycles of the Earth. And everything we've tried, we can't do it. The Earth is too powerful. And if the language is heard as frustration, like if you're reading the King James, then the tone becomes cynical. But if it's heard as observation, the tone becomes very sobering. Solomon is not raging against the sun. He is measuring human permanence against creation's repetition. So the phrase, the earth remains forever, must also be heard carefully. It does not deny final judgment or transformation. Within the scope of earthly experience, the earth appears enduring while human generations dissolve. So the contrast intensifies mortality without attacking divine order. Now, the Ethiopian rendering maintains this observational restraint. The King James does as well, though its archaic cadence can sometimes feel heavier, more dramatic to modern ears. And tone shifts subtly, not in content, but in sound. Now, the cycles do not accuse humanity, they actually humble it. And they reveal that labor, achievement, and memory do not arrest time, as nature continues its pattern while names fade. Well, that is exposure Ecclesiastes is making. This section reinforces the boundary established earlier. Under the sun, repetition governs. So the question is not whether God exists beyond the cycle. The question is whether anything within the cycle secures permanence. So the cadence remains measured. The theology remains restrained. And Solomon is going and looking at lifetime of kings after they left Egypt, the children of Israel, and how they've had their ups and downs, and how it seems they cannot hold on to power for the good of the world, because they felt and were told by God they were his favorite, his chosen. And so he doesn't understand why they can't remain in power as it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And this is the only thing he can think of after, and through his wisdom. God never took away his wisdom after he fell. But this is after he fell and started putting idols in the temple. So Solomon now turns inwardly. Having observed the cycles of nature, he examines the pursuit most often praised as humanity's strength, which is wisdom. If permanence cannot be secured through labor, perhaps it can be secured through understanding or knowledge. So the text must again be heard before it is judged. Here's the Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox witness. It says, and I quote, "And I gave my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This grievous task God has given to the sons of men to be exercised in it. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vapor and a striving after wind. That which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is lacking cannot be numbered." Now here's those same verses, but under the King James rendering. "And I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. That which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered." The structural parallels remain clear here, yet tone emerges in very small phrases. The Ethiopian rendering speaks of a striving after wind. The King James says vexation of spirit. Well, the difference is not trivial. Striving after wind suggests effort directed towards something ungraspable. Vexation of spirit suggests inward agitation. So one emphasizes futility of pursuit, and the other emphasizes emotional disturbance. So both witnesses affirm limitation. Wisdom is pursued diligently. Solomon does not mock it, he applies his heart to it. And the task is described as grievous or sore, but not because wisdom is evil, but because the scope of inquiry reveals constraint. It reveals God and his power and his glory. To understand everything under heaven is to encounter boundaries one cannot repair, like they're trying to do a CERN. So that which is crooked cannot be made straight. Well, that line does not deny reform or righteousness. It acknowledges structural limits within the observed world. Not every distortion yields to human correction. Not every lack can be filled by insight alone. Wisdom exposes reality, but it does not always repair it. If you're really listening, this stuff is heavy and full of wisdom. The Ethiopian phrasing preserves a sense of sober pursuit meeting limitation. And the King James phrasing, especially vexation of spirit, can intensify the emotional register. To modern ears, it may sound closer to despair. Yet both witnesses maintain that the inquiry remains under heaven, within the bounded scope already established. Now, Solomon does not conclude that wisdom is worthless. He concludes that wisdom does not overturn mortality or even fracture the cycle. It clarifies the pattern, but it does not cancel it. The limitation lies not in wisdom's virtue, but in its jurisdiction. And this distinction matters theologically. If wisdom is portrayed as self-defeating, then the book leans towards cynicism, which many Christians assume he's being cynical. If wisdom is portrayed as clarifying but bounded, then the book leans towards humility, as Solomon is giving up and just giving over to God, as he can't even fix the world. And the tone determines whether the listener hears collapse or correction. Thus is why the King James and the Ethiopian complement each other. The investigation here remains consistent with the anchor here. Scripture speaks first. The cadence is weighed carefully. The preacher's voice does not rage against knowledge. It acknowledges that even insight cannot escape the horizon of death. And under the sun, wisdom illuminates reality, but it does not conquer it. So, having tested wisdom, Solomon turns to experience itself. If understanding cannot secure permanence, perhaps enjoyment can soften transience. And he does not speculate from distance. Solomon participates. And the testimony must again be heard plainly. Here it is in the Ethiopian, I quote, "I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Therefore enjoy good. But behold, this also was vapor. I said of laughter, it is madness, and of pleasure, what does it accomplish?" It's a heavy, heavy thing, he said. "Then I commanded joy," it goes on, "because a man has nothing better under the sun than to eat and to drink and to rejoice." I mean, party like it's 1999. "For this will remain with him in his labor all the days of his life, which God gives him under the sun." Okay? So here are those same verses, but in the King James rendering. "I said in mine heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. I said to laughter, it is mad, and to mirth, what doeth it? Then I commended mirth, because a man hath no better thing under the sun than to eat and to drink and to be merry. And for that shall abide with him of his labor the days of his life, which God giveth him under the sun. Well, the structure between the Ethiopian King James, they remain parallel, but tone surfaces and details here. Between mirth and be merry. In the King James, it carries a festive connotation. The Ethiopian renderings, joy and rejoice, can sound steadier and less exuberant. One can feel celebratory and the other feels measured. And the different shapes, whether pleasure is framed as indulgence or as simple gratitude. Well, Solomon does not condemn enjoyment outright. He tests it. He's asking questions. Well, what is it? He finds that pleasure alone does not secure permanence, and laughter cannot prevent death. Achievement cannot suspend decay. Yet within that limitation, he commends a modest joy. To eat, to drink, and to receive daily life as a gift. Now, both witnesses preserve the crucial phrase, which God gives. Enjoyment is not autonomous. It is granted. The presence of divine giving anchors the book in covenant reality, even when exposing earthly limits. The pleasure is not ultimate, but it is not meaningless either. It's contextual. So the difference between this also was vapor and this also is vanity, again, totally hinges on tone. And if heard as accusation, pleasures seem morally suspect. This gets us into the angry God. This gets us into thinking, oh my God, if I'm partying with my neighbor, even though I'm not drinking, it's vanity. I'm doing it for pride and my ego. It hinges on tone. And if heard as accusation, pleasure seems morally suspect. That sucks. But if heard as transience, then pleasure appears fragile but permitted. So Solomon does not outlaw joy. He refuses to absolutize it, meaning it's not going to always be joyful. You can't create the perfect utopia. It'll never work. No one will get along, even if there's peace and we're partying like it's 1999. This world will break because we live in a fallen world. And King Solomon at this time was the king of all. He was the king of the earth. No joke. So the repeated boundary under the sun remains intact here. The inquiry has not expanded into eternity. And the preacher, Solomon, asks, what can accompany a person through labor within moral days? Well, the answer is very modest. Gratitude within limits. Not triumph, not escape, just simple sustenance. So the theology here is delicate. If translation intensifies language toward cynicism, then the book feels bleak. If it preserves restraint, the book feels sober yet humane. The preacher acknowledges that joy cannot conquer mortality, but it can accompany obedience within it. That's really cool. It makes us look at Ecclesiastes not as a bleak and, vanity, everything's vanity. Oh God, why are we even born? But the Ethiopian canon shows us why. It shows us that Solomon is asking questions and trying to teach. This is a teaching lesson that nothing new is under the sun. Quit trying to create utopias. There's going to be ups and downs. The best thing you can do is appreciate your family, appreciate what you have today. And that's a lesson that you wouldn't ever even know that was in Ecclesiastes unless we went through the Ethiopian canon. That's a trip. So pleasure is tested and found insufficient as savior. Yet as gift, it is affirmed. That's key. Pleasure will not replace Jesus Christ. It's not going to keep you happy. It's a temporary thing that you should appreciate in the moment. Yet as gift, it's affirmed by Solomon. And this tension must remain audible, as the voice of Ecclesiastes does not collapse into despair like we think it does, nor does it rise into any celebration. It stands between them, measuring what can be received without illusion. So Solomon now widens his observation beyond individual pursuits and names something even deeper: structure. Life is not random chaos under the sun. It is governed by seasons, laws. The familiar passage must be heard slowly because its cadence carries its theology. For example, in the Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox Witness, it says, and I quote, "To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under the sun, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance." Yes, that song is in my head too. For every season, there is a season, Yeah. Well, now you know where they got it from. They copied it from the Bible. Now, here's that same verse in King James rendering. "To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance." The parallelism is preserved in both witnesses here. The rhythm is very steady. The passage does not argue. It enumerates. The repeated phrase, "a time," becomes a drumbeat here. The theology is embedded in repetition rather than explanation. The Ethiopian phrasing reads with direct clarity, "to uproot what is planted," and the King James phrase, "to pluck up that which is planted," carries older English cadence that can sound heavier to modern ears, yet both preserve the same architecture. Life unfolds within appointed boundaries. This passage does not celebrate violence, nor does it sanctify sorrow. People kill people all the time. He's not saying a time for us to go kill. No, just people kill. And it just won't stop. And he's basically trying to say, yeah, you want to create this perfect utopia, and you don't want anybody to kill anybody. You want to outlaw murder and think that that's going to stop people from killing, but they're going to do it. They won't stop. You can legislate all you want. It's going to still continue until Jesus comes. Period. This is profound if we understood Ecclesiastes as it is. And he's not saying there's a time for us to kill. He's saying under the season of things, the repetition of things, under the sun, it will continue and it will continue. And there is no way, because remember, God gave him judgment so that he could rule the people. He's talking about being a king and ruling the people. And this is a message to other kings. The passage does not celebrate violence nor sanctify sorrow. It acknowledges inevitability within ordered time. He tried to outlaw murder and people still killed. So birth and death are paired. Destruction and construction are paired. Grief and joy are paired. Solomon is not assigning moral equivalence to all acts. He's describing seasons within mortal existence. And the theological tension here is very subtle. Well, Like a fly just shut up out of nowhere. Never seen it. Now just like sitting up there. How bizarre. What? I don't know. You know how those people say, remember when the flies land on congressmen, they're like, he's wicked, they're the devil. Well, flies, yeah, they're everywhere. Anyway. So the theological tension here is subtle. If this is heard as determination, then Ecclesiastes may feel fatalistic. If it's heard as boundary language, it affirms that human experience unfolds within divine allowance. So the text does not attribute every act directly to God's impulse. It places events within a governed structure of time. Now, the cadence here is crucial. The Ethiopian witness tends towards smooth clarity, allowing the rhythm to feel balanced. The King James retains poetic gravity that can intensify the emotional resonance, but neither denies order. Both present life as sequenced rather than chaotic. And following the list, Solomon asks, what profit remains from labor in light of these appointed seasons? When he says labor, it means doing good. He observes that God has made everything beautiful in its time and has set eternity in the human heart, yet without granting full comprehension of his work from the beginning to the end. So this line becomes a hinge. Eternity is sensed, but it's not grasped. Time is ordered, but not controlled by human will, period. The structure humbles without condemning, and it reveals limitation without denying any oversight. So eternity is sensed, but it's not grasped. Time is ordered, but not controlled by human will. The structure humbles without condemning, and it reveals limitation without denying any oversight. So here the tone matters again. If the language feels mechanical, then theology tilts toward cold determinism. If the language feels measured, then theology leans toward reverent acknowledgement of divine ordering. So Solomon does not despair over time. He bows before it. That's a bumblebee, Robert Gertison. That is not a fly. He put an emoji of a fly, of a bumblebee instead of a fly. You know, I'm gonna deal with this dude right now. Hold on. Did I get it? I feel so much better. That was driving me nuts. I don't like flies. Flies bother the sheep. And the shepherd pours oil over the sheep's head so the flies don't dig in to their skin and lay eggs. And those eggs cause maggots and all kinds of problems for the sheep as the maggots eat the skin. It's awful. I see that as a demon trying to discourage me. Well, I got it. Sucked it into the miniature vacuum. So this part reinforces that Ecclesiastes is not nihilistic, period. So you can feel better now. It's bounded, and the seasons do not erase any meaning. They contextualize it. And the examination must listen carefully to whether both witnesses preserve this balance of order, humility, and restrained acknowledgement of God's governance within time. So Solomon now turns to something heavier than repetition or limitation. Robert says, I couldn't find a fly emoji. Seriously, there's not a fly emoji? You know, you'd think if there would be one, it would be a fly. But no. He turns to injustice, Solomon. Now, if life were only cynical, it might be endured, but the presence of oppression presses the question further, as the text must again be heard without softening. Now, the Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox witness says, and I quote, "And moreover, I saw under the sun the place of judgment, that wickedness was there, and the place of righteousness, that iniquity was there. I said in my heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time, there are every purpose, and for every work." Therefore, every purpose and for every work. Here is the same verse in the King James. "And moreover, I saw under the sun the place of judgment, that wickedness was there, and the place of righteousness, that iniquity was there. I said in mine heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time, therefore, every purpose and for every work." Pretty close. Thought I saw that fly again. Here, the wording between the witness remains nearly identical. The force lies not in lexical shift, but in tonal accumulation. Solomon does not deny that judgment exists. He observes that even institutions designed for justice can contain corruption. Hello? This America, your state, your government. Oh, hold on. Oh, you stupid little son of a... You're gonna... Damn it! You went behind. Where did you go, you little rat bastard? Where did you go? Oh, I hate this. So that happened. Are you not entertained? Anyway. So King Solomon is saying in Ecclesiastes that, hey, there's going to be people who run your state that are going to be evil, and there's going to be times when they're not. And there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. Why are you fixated on it? Even the Bible says that their corruption will be exposed. Evil cannot hide forever. This book is absolutely amazing. Once we get the clarity we've been looking for under the Ethiopian canon. So Solomon does not deny that judgment exists. He observes that even institutions designed for justice can contain corruption. And the place of judgment is not free from wickedness. So this observation could tip the book into a despair if heard in isolation. But the second line stabilizes it. God shall judge. Doesn't the Bible say that, hey, let God judge things. Stop trying to judge it yourself. Doesn't he? I believe it does. The preacher, who is Solomon, does not conclude that injustice is ultimate. He concludes that delay exists, and there is a time there for every purpose and every work. And the repetition of time ties back to the earlier architecture of seasons. There's a season for everything. There's going to be people who take over and completely ruin your life, but that's never going to go away. And if you had wisdom, you'd understand this. So the theology here is restrained. Solomon does not claim that God intervenes immediately in every case. He does not claim that injustice goes unanswered either. He affirms eventual reckoning within a structured order of time. So silence is not abandonment, it's delay within boundary. This book, which in the King James just brings us despair. Yet in the Ethiopian, it shows us that wherever you live, there's a time and a season for what's going on. Nothing's new under the sun. There's nowhere you can escape or run to without corruption following. It just never stops. And silence is not abandonment. So later he observes oppression more directly, tears of oppressed with no comforter, power in the hands of oppressors. The language here seems stark. Yet even here, the book does not dissolve into accusation against heaven. It names imbalance under the sun without declaring divine indifference. So tone, again, matters here profoundly. If the language is intensified emotionally, the passage may feel like protest against God. If it is heard as sobering testimony, it becomes lament without rebellion. The Ethiopian phrasing maintains clarity without embellishment, and the King James retains solemn weight, but both preserve the tension without resolving it prematurely. So the preacher, Solomon, his realism does not negate divine judgment. It postpones it within the structure already described. There is a time for every purpose, and that includes reckoning. The delay tests human patience, but does not overturn divine authority. Injustice under the sun does not disprove oversight beyond it. It exposes the limitation of human systems. And the place of judgment may fail, but ultimate judgment is not removed from the text. So this presses you guys to confront discomfort without collapsing into cynicism. Ecclesiastes does not promise immediate correction. It promises eventual accountability. The cadence remains controlled even while the subject grows heavy. And those who have wisdom do not react emotionally to what their government does. So the examination must listen carefully here. If translation heightens emotional agitation, then the book leans towards protest. If it preserves restraint, the book maintains sober acknowledgement of delay. And under the sun, injustice is visible, but beyond it, judgment remains certain. So what Solomon's saying in his own words, chill out, honey bunny, everything's going to be okay. It's not your fault. God's not mad at you. This is how the world works. It is a world that decays into vapor. And it's not your fault. God's not mad at you. So Solomon now approaches the subject that has hovered over every previous observation. This is death. Cycles, wisdom, pleasure, injustice, all of them converge into this. And the text must be heard very carefully because tone at this point determines whether the book sounds nihilistic or restrained. Here's the verse in the Ethiopian. For that which befalls the sons of men befalls beasts, even one thing befalls them, as one dies, so dies the other. Yes, they all have one breath, so that a man has no advantage over a beast, for all is vapor. All go unto one place. All are of the dust, and all return to dust. Who knows the spirit of man that goes upward, and the spirit of the beast that goes down to the earth? Here's that same verse in the King James rendering. For that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beasts, even one thing befalleth them. As the one dieth, so dieth the other, yea. They have all one breath, so that a man hath no preeminence above a beast, for all is vanity. All go unto one place, all are of the dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knoweth the spirit of man, what goeth upward, and the spirit of the beast that goeth downward to the earth? Question mark, unquote. The structural correspondence is exact. Yet again, the tonal hinge rests on a simple word or a phrase. All is vapor. Well, it carries fragility. All is vanity can carry emptiness tinged with moral weight. The theology does not change, but the emotional coloring may. So the preacher does not deny that humans are distinct in creation. He measures what is observable under the sun. Death equalizes. Dust receives both man and beast. Breath animates both. Within the boundary of mortality, advantage appears. So the phrase one breath becomes critical. Breath animates life temporarily, and when breath departs, the body returns to dust. So the Ethiopian rendering's consistency with vapor intensifies this image of transience. The King James phrase vanity may feel more abstract to modern ears and less tactile. So the question, who knows the spirit of man that goes upward? Well, that's not denial of the soul. It's rhetorical humility. Under the sun, human observation cannot fully map what lies beyond death. We just don't know. And Solomon does not assert annihilation. He acknowledges epistemic boundary. So tone determines whether this passage is heard as materialism or limitation. And if you guys forget the repeated boundary of earthly observation, then the text may sound like denial of eternity. But if the boundary is preserved, the passage becomes a reminder that mortality levels visible distinctions without erasing divine oversight. But both witness maintain the dust imagery from Genesis, as humanity formed from dust returns to dust, and the cycle of breath and earth reappears. Solomon does not rage against this pattern, he names it outright. And the equalization power of death humbles ambition, wisdom, and pleasure alike. It does not cancel judgment, it intensifies it. And if all return to dust, then permanence must lie beyond what is seen. So Solomon does not deny that possibility. He simply refuses to speculate beyond what is observable. So the examination must listen closely here. If translation sharpens the language into futility, theology tilts toward despair. If it preserves the imagery of breath and dust, theology remains sober but grounded, as death is not romanticized. It's acknowledged as a boundary. So Ecclesiastes does not claim that death is the end of all things. It claims that death ends human boasting under the sun. Breath is given, breath departs, dust remains. The tone remains restrained even at the edge of mortality. So after cycles, wisdom, pleasure, and justice, and death, which have all been measured, Ecclesiastes closes with clarity. Solomon does not leave the listener suspended in observation. He anchors the inquiry in accountability, and the conclusion must be heard directly. Here it is in the Ethiopian, I quote, "Let us hear the conclusions of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether it is good or whether it is evil." Well, here's that same verse in the King James rendering. "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil." So the wording remains almost identical between the two witnesses. The tonal difference, if there's any, rests in cadence rather than vocabulary. The Ethiopian phrasing reads with smooth modern clarity, and the King James carries formal gravity in its older English structure. So both preserve the same theological anchor. And the book that began with vapor does not end in despair. It ends in reverence. Fear God does not contradict the earlier observations. It frames them. Solomon's examination of limitation was never an argument against heaven. It was a removal of illusion beneath it. And the phrase, "the whole duty of man," in the King James has shaped centuries of preaching. The Ethiopian rendering preserves the same meaning without added flourish. The emphasis remains simple: alignment. Solomon does not command ambition. He commands reverence and obedience. And the promise of judgment reappears here decisively. Earlier, injustice was observed in the place of judgment. Now, ultimate judgment is affirmed. Every work, every secret thing will be brought forward. And delay does not equal neglect. Silence does not equal indifference. So tone matters at the close. If the earlier language has been heard as nihilistic, this ending can sound abrupt. almost corrective even. If the earlier language has been heard as sober limitation, well, this ending sounds consistent. So Solomon measured earthly striving and then placed it beneath divine authority. So the theology of Ecclesiastes resolves not by escaping mortality, but by placing mortality within accountability, as breath is just temporary, judgment is not. Labor is bounded. Obedience endures beyond the cycle. And both witnesses preserve this final clarity. The cadence may differ slightly in sound, but the content remains intact. Solomon's voice, after stripping the illusion from ambition, restores orientation through reverence. So Ecclesiastes does not conclude with vapor alone, it concludes with fear of God. And the book that humbled human striving ends by affirming divine oversight. And the restraint here maintained throughout the text now resolves into alignment. Now, the book began with repetition, vapor of vapors, or vanity of vanities, and it closes with judgment. The architecture is deliberate. Transience is named first so that accountability will be heard clearly at the end. The final movement must gather the earlier themes without distorting their tone. Here's another verse in the Ethiopian. It says, and I quote, "Vapor of vapor, says the preacher, all is vapor. Fear God and keep his commandments. For God shall bring every work into judgment." Here's the King James rendering. "Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, all is vanity. For God, fear God and keep his commandments, for God shall bring every work into judgment." The opening word and the closing command now stand in tension. If vanity is heard as moral emptiness, then the book may sound like condemnation followed by command. If vapor is heard as transience, the book sounds like exposure followed by orientation. So the difference shapes how the preacher's voice is remembered. And throughout the book, breath has functioned as a boundary. Life is animated briefly and then returns to dust. Human advantage dissolves under death. Wisdom cannot prevent decay, and pleasure cannot cancel mortality. So in that framework, obedience becomes the only response that outlives the cycle. Now, the Ethiopian rendering's consistent sense of vapor reinforces fragility. The King James word vanity, though historically linked to the Hebrew word hevel, Hevel, carries layered English meanings that can tilt toward futility or moral fault. Neither witness alters doctrine here. Both affirm judgment, but tone colors the path that leads there. So Solomon never denies meaning. He denies permanence to what cannot endure. When labor, pleasure, and ambition are exposed as temporary, the listener is not left in emptiness. The listener is directed toward reverence. Fear of God is not introduced as a solution to despair. It is revealed as the stable response within limitation. Judgment gathers the scattered observations, and justice seen earlier will not remain unresolved. Secrets will not remain hidden, like Epstein files are just coming out, regardless if Bill Gates likes it or not. So the apparent equality of death does not erase moral distinction. Breath departs, but accountability still remains. So the closing repetition of all is vapor does not cancel the command. It actually frames it, because life is fleeting. Obedience matters more, not less. Because time is bounded, alignment becomes urgent. The preacher's realism intensifies reverence rather than weakening it. So tone here determines whether the book is remembered as bleak or bracing. And if heard as despairing, the final exhortation feels imposed. If heard as measured, the final exhortation feels inevitable. The Ethiopian witness and the King James rendering both preserve the theological core. But the question is how their lexical choices really shape the listener's emotional journey through it. Ecclesiastes does not leave the reader with vapor alone. It leaves the reader with vapor beneath judgment, Breath fades. Work remains accountable. And under the sun, everything is fleeting. Before God, nothing is forgotten. So to conclude, Ecclesiastes does not dismantle faith. It dismantles illusion. If you read this and understood it, you would stop freaking out about presidents, countries, counties, states, cities, neighbors, problems, because all is under the control of God. And you will realize that all is just vapor. The best thing you can do is appreciate what you have and love your neighbor. And from its opening declaration of vapor to its closing affirmation of judgment, the book maintains a single movement. Expose what cannot endure, then anchor what does. Labor, wisdom, pleasure, injustice, and death are all examined within the boundary of under the sun. Solomon never claims that nothing has meaning. He claims that nothing within mortal cycles can secure permanence on its own. Remember, he was the most wise man of the earth of that day. And this stuff he's saying, if we took to heart, could change our lives for the better. We could actually have peace if we really believed in what he was saying. And the comparison between the Ethiopian Tewahedo witness and the King James rendering, it's revealed more tonal than doctrinal distinction. Only one time did it veer off of theology, just once. And the central theological claims remain intact in both traditions. God judges, God orders time, God gives breath, God requires reverence. Yet the lexical choice between vanity and vapor, between vexation and striving, between archaic cadence and modern clarity, subtly shapes how the emotional weight of the book is received. If vanity is heard as moral accusation, then the book can feel can feel like it's condemnation. If vapor is heard as transience, the book feels observational and restrained. So the theology does not change, but the path the listener walks through the text may feel heavier or steadier depending on tone. And in a book where breath and dust are central images, the nuance of wording carries disproportionate influence. So the repeated boundary under the sun protects the text from nihilism when it is heard carefully. The preacher never denies divine oversight. He refuses to let earthly striving masquerade as eternity. And death equalizes visible distinctions. But judgment restores moral differentiation. Silence does not erase accountability either. And delay does not cancel reckoning. So Ecclesiastes ultimately affirms that because life is fleeting, obedience matters more, not less. Robert Gerderson says, "Great show, James. I'm not going to worry about the outside things I can't control." Exactly. Something's shaking here. I don't know. Oh. So Ecclesiastes affirms that because life is fleeting, obedience matters more, not less. And because time is bounded, reverence becomes urgent. The book that begins with vapor ends with fear of God. The realism intensifies alignment rather than dissolving it. So this examination has followed the established anchor. Scripture first, commentary second, tone weighed carefully without assigning motive. And the Ethiopian witness and the King James rendering have both preserved the theological spine of Ecclesiastes. And the question has not been about corruption, but just simple cadence. Not accusation, but perception. I think that's pretty cool. I don't know about you. So Ecclesiastes clears ambition here of its illusions and leaves reverence standing. Breath departs, dust remains, work enters judgment. Under the sun, permanence cannot be secured. Before God, nothing is lost to memory. This has been Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carter. Tune in tomorrow night when we examine another book from the King James Bible and comparing it to the Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox text. Guys, it's been an honor to serve you guys. God bless you, God thank you, and God keep you. We will see you mañana.
This has been Cause Before Symptom with your host, James Carner. Go to his website, jamescarner.com, and sign up for his newsletter. Also, download his free books on the breath war, the crown of blood, and the ritual machine. Fix your body by buying his award-winning detox formula, removing heavy metals and parasites. You'll feel better and live longer. Go to elitepotion.com. And one more thing, please. Just try and love your neighbor, because if you do, the world would be a better place. See you tomorrow.